My parents walked into court asking a judge to take everything I had built, my savings, my car, even the apartment I had paid off without a dime from them. Their lawyer leaned back with a smile, certain I would leave that room powerless. Then Judge Mills reached the page of my asset list. His eyes froze on one transfer request. The color vanished from his face. He stood fast, his chair slamming backward. "Stop this hearing! Call security!" I thought he had found proof that I was incompetent. Instead, he had found something my parents never expected me to survive long enough to uncover. I was 32 when my parents tried to take control of my life. But the truth is, they had stopped acting like parents long before that courtroom. When I was 8, my mother, Diane, packed a small blue suitcase and left it beside my grandparents' front door. She said she and my father, Martin, needed a few weeks to get settled. My father kept his eyes on the driveway while she spoke. Neither of them looked at me when they drove away. For months, I kept half my clothes inside that suitcase. I thought unpacking meant admitting they were not coming back. My grandparents, Evelyn and Walter Carter, never said that out loud. They simply made room. Evelyn folded a knitted blanket across the foot of my bed every winter. She baked apple pie on Sundays, and the whole kitchen smelled like cinnamon and browned butter. Walter left the porch light on whenever I came home late from school. At dinner, he asked what I thought, then waited for the answer. That was new to me. My parents still appeared when it suited them. Thanksgiving, graduation, birthdays with enough relatives around to take pictures. My mother usually arrived carrying a store-bought cake and a bright smile that disappeared the moment the camera did. My father would place one hand on my shoulder and ask questions whose answers he should have known. "What grade are you in now?" At 16. I stopped correcting him. Evelyn never tried to replace my mother. She did something harder. She showed up every day. Walter taught me how money worked at the old oak desk in his study. He spread bills, repair estimates, and property statements in front of me and asked one question over and over. What does the number mean? Not what it looked like. Not how it made me feel. What it meant. That habit followed me into college, then into my career as a wealth manager. By 32, I had spent 10 years helping people protect what they had built. I saved carefully. I bought my own car with salary and bonus money. I purchased a modest apartment for about $600,000 and paid it off before I inherited anything. The day I made the final payment, I carried the brass key to Evelyn. She closed my fingers around it. "Some doors should only open for the person who earned the key," she said. I kept that key long after she died. Walter passed 8 months later. Their home felt hollow without them. Every clock suddenly too loud, at the reading of the estate. I learned they had left me about $12 million in property and investments. My mother did not ask whether I was grieving. She leaned forward and asked, "Who controls the accounts now?" My father stayed silent, but I noticed him slide the account summary closer to himself. For the first time all afternoon, both of them looked fully awake. Neither one looked at me. At the time, I thought it was just another cold question. I did not understand it was the first move, for the first few weeks after the estate meeting. My parents behaved like people I had spent my whole life wishing they would become. My mother called every Sunday. My father sent short messages asking whether I was sleeping, eating, or taking time away from work. They suggested a family trip to Vermont, somewhere quiet where we could start over without lawyers and paperwork between us. Part of me knew the timing was wrong. Another part of me was still 8 years old, standing beside a blue suitcase, waiting for them to come back. So I went. The cabin smelled like pine cleaner and wood smoke. Snow pressed against the windows, and my mother made coffee each morning as if we had always done things like that. But every warm conversation curved toward the same subject. Was I planning to sell my grandparents' house? How much cash had been transferred? Who could authorize withdrawals if I became ill? My father asked whether the apartment was included in the estate. When I told him I had bought it years earlier, he nodded slowly, like he was filing the answer away. By the second evening, I understood the trip was not about rebuilding our family. It was an audit, a month later. My mother invited me to lunch at a restaurant near downtown Boston. She chose a corner table away from the other customers, before our food arrived. She placed a folder beside my water glass. "It's nothing dramatic," she said. "Just a safeguard." Inside were papers giving my parents joint approval over major transactions. Another section allowed them to sell property if two professionals decided I was emotionally unfit to manage it. I closed the folder. "No." My father's jaw tightened. "You're treating us like strangers. You only ask about accounts," I said. "Neither of you has asked how I sleep since they died." My mother's smile disappeared. "You're overwhelmed. Phoebe, you just can't see it yet." I slid the folder back across the table, then let me be overwhelmed with my own life. 3 weeks later, a courier delivered a court petition to my office. My parents claimed grief had made me unstable. They said I had sold assets too quickly, moved money without proper guidance, and isolated myself from family. They asked the court to appoint them as temporary financial supervisors, not only over the inheritance, over my personal savings, my car, my apartment. Until the hearing, the court restricted large transfers from the estate. The next morning, one of my clients called and asked whether the rumors about my judgment were true. After we hung up, I placed the brass key on my desk. That was when I finally understood. My parents had not returned to become part of my life. They had returned to own it. The worst part was not the restriction on the estate. It was reading my mother's statement. She wrote that I had manipulated Evelyn during the final months of her illness, that I had made myself indispensable so my grandparents would depend on me, that every late-night hospital visit, every grocery run, every medication schedule had been part of some plan to secure the inheritance. I made it through 3 pages before my vision blurred. For one ugly second, I was back in Evelyn's bedroom, listening to the oxygen machine hum while rain tapped the windows. Her hand had been cold in mine. She had whispered, "Don't let people rewrite what love looked like." Now my mother was trying to do exactly that. I sat in Ethan Brooks's office with the statement folded in my lap until the paper softened under my fingers. "I can't let this become the official story," I said. Ethan did not offer comfort he could not guarantee. He pushed a legal pad toward me. "Then we prove 3 things," he said. "You were competent. Your property was yours before the inheritance, and the transactions they're using against you did not come from you." That sentence gave me something grief had taken away: direction. We started with my personal assets. My savings account had been opened years earlier. My car had been paid for with salary and bonus money. The apartment had been paid off before Evelyn died. Every major decision came with records, dates, and independent advice. Then Ethan found the payments. About $300,000 had been charged through an old estate access account. The descriptions made them look like my purchases, but I had never seen them before. Furniture, travel deposits, luxury services. None of it had gone to me. The access trail led back to my parents. During Evelyn's illness, Diane and Martin had been allowed to pay household bills. That permission should have ended when Walter died. Somehow, it had not. "They used their own transactions to make you look reckless," Ethan said. I stared at the page until the numbers stopped looking like numbers. They looked like fingerprints. Grace Turner, my grandparents' former housekeeper, gave us the next piece. Diane had sent her messages asking her to describe me as controlling and emotionally unstable. She even offered to help with one of Grace's debts if she would protect the family. Grace refused. By then, I was no longer crying. I was documenting. Every call went through Ethan. Every account was reviewed. Every piece of evidence was preserved. I posted nothing online. I confronted no one then. On the morning before the final hearing, Ethan called. Someone had tried to move another $250,000 from an account protected by the court. The request traced back to my parents. I closed my hand around the brass key in my pocket. This time, I was not the child waiting by the door. I was the one deciding who got in. By 9 that morning, the courtroom felt cold. My parents sat behind their attorney, Rachel Moore. Diane wore navy. Martin kept rubbing his thumb across the edge of a legal pad. Rachel looked calm enough for all 3 of them when Judge Mills entered. Everyone stood. Rachel began by repeating the accusation that had followed me for months. My parents claimed that I was too irresponsible to manage my inheritance. She pointed to a chart filled with selected transactions. My car, the apartment repairs, a property sale, money moved into conservative funds, then the $300,000 in purchases I had never made. Their expert, Michael Ross, called the pattern emotionally reactive. Rachel smiled confidently, as if everything were already decided. Then Ethan stood. He did not raise his voice. He asked Michael one question at a time. Had he known the car was purchased with my salary? No. Had he known the apartment was paid off before I inherited anything? No. Had he reviewed the inspection reports showing the property I sold needed major structural work? No. Had he seen the tax plan explaining why money was moved into safer accounts? No. Michael's answers grew quieter. Finally, Ethan asked, "So your opinion was based on transactions provided without their full context?" Michael looked toward Rachel, then back at the judge. Yes. The room changed after that. Ethan handed Judge Mills an asset list. It showed when each account had been opened, where the money came from, who had authorized every payment, and which assets existed before my grandparents died. Judge Mills read slowly. Personal savings, established 10 years before inheritance. He turned the page. Vehicle, purchased with earned income. Another page. Apartment, paid in full before the estate transferred. My mother stopped looking at me. The judge reached the section containing the disputed payments. His brow tightened. These expenses were initiated through access granted to Diane and Martin Bennett during Evelyn Carter's illness. Yes, Your Honor, Ethan said, and that authority should have ended after Walter Carter's death. Yes. Judge Mills looked at Rachel. Was this disclosed in the petition? Rachel's expression changed. I was told these were Phoebe's transactions. Ethan placed one final page on the evidence stand. This morning, at 7:42, someone attempted to transfer $250,000 from an account currently protected by this court. Judge Mills picked it up. The silence became so complete I could hear the vent humming above us. He read the routing information twice. His face went pale. Then he stood so quickly his chair struck the wall behind him. Stop immediately. Call security. 2 officers moved to the courtroom doors. My father pushed back from the table. I didn't transfer anything. Diane turned on him. You signed the request. You said it was already approved. Rachel stepped away from them. Judge Mills ordered every phone, tablet, and financial record connected to the attempted transfer preserved. No one was permitted to leave until court investigators arrived, for the first time. My parents looked afraid. Ethan then called Grace Turner. Grace described the messages Diane had sent, asking her to call me controlling and unstable. She read the offer to help with her debt if she would protect the family. Diane whispered, "That is not what I meant." Then Ethan played the recording from my grandparents' estate meeting. My mother's voice filled the room, if the institutions questioned Phoebe's judgment. "They'll freeze everything before she can stop us," Martin answered. "She won't fight publicly. She hates embarrassing the family." I felt something inside me go still. They had not only studied my finances, they had studied my shame. Diane finally broke. My parents humiliated me. She snapped. They gave her what should have been mine. I placed the brass apartment key on the table. "You never asked to help me," I said. "You asked for my savings, my car, my home, and the right to decide whether I could use them." I looked at both of them. That is not protection. That is ownership. Judge Mills closed the file. This hearing began as a question about Phoebe Bennett's competence. He said, "It is now a question about yours." Judge Mills did not rule immediately. He ordered a recess while court investigators secured the records, confirmed the attempted transfer, and reviewed the access history. My parents sat across the hallway, separated from each other. Diane stared at the floor. Martin kept whispering to Rachel, but she barely answered. I stood by the window with Ethan, my hand resting over the brass key in my pocket. I had imagined what justice might feel like. I thought it would be loud, triumphant, maybe satisfying. Instead, it felt quiet, When we returned, Judge Mills spoke for nearly 20 minutes. He found no evidence that I lacked financial capacity. He said every major decision I had made was supported by research, professional advice, and a clear purpose. The temporary restrictions on the estate were lifted immediately. Then he turned to my parents. Their petition, he said, had been built on incomplete information, misleading descriptions, and financial activity they had failed to disclose. He denied their request and ordered them to cover most of my legal costs. The disputed $300,000 would be frozen pending formal review. The attempted $250,000 transfer would be referred to the proper authorities, along with the messages sent to Grace and the records connected to the old Access account. My parents were also barred from contacting any institution holding my assets. Diane's face tightened as if the ruling itself were an insult. Martin looked smaller than I remembered, outside the courtroom. Diane caught up with me near the elevators. "You destroyed this family," she said. Her voice was low, but sharp enough to cut. I turned around. "No," I said. "This family broke the day you left me with a suitcase and came back only when there was money." Martin stepped between us. I was trying to keep the peace. I looked at him for a long moment. Why did keeping the peace always require me to stay silent? He had no answer. Neither of them apologized. I walked away before the elevator doors opened. The legal review lasted several months. My parents were required to return the money linked to the unauthorized payments. Their remaining access rights were terminated, and they were prohibited from managing funds connected to the estate. Additional penalties were handled without my involvement. I did not ask for more than the law allowed. I had spent enough of my life letting their choices control my emotions. My career recovered slowly. One client who had paused new business called me after reading the court's findings. "I should have trusted your record," he said. I appreciated the apology, but I no longer needed it to know who I was. I stayed in wealth management. Though my work changed, I began helping older clients create clearer protections around account access, family loans, and estate transitions. I also volunteered with a local financial education program for people recovering from economic control. Months later, I came home late after one of those sessions. The hallway smelled faintly of someone's burned dinner. My feet hurt. The city outside my window was blurred with rain. I unlocked my apartment and held the brass key for a second. I used to grip it whenever I felt afraid, as if ownership could disappear unless I held on hard enough. That night, I placed it in the small bowl beside the door. The lock clicked behind me. For the first time, the silence inside did not feel like abandonment. It felt like peace. I had not fought for $12 million. I had fought for the right to open my own door without asking anyone's permission. Real love does not demand your passwords, your property, or the right to make your choices for you. Setting boundaries does not make you cold, selfish, or ungrateful. It means you understand that care without respect is just control wearing a softer face. My victory was not seeing my parents afraid. It was realizing I was no longer afraid of them. If someone in your family has ever used guilt, money, or love to control you, share your story in the comments. You are not alone. And subscribe, because the next story may sound closer to home than you expect.